It was Christmas Eve in Modesto, California. A night meant for laughter, warmth, and love. But inside one quiet home on Covena Avenue, something was terribly wrong. Lassie Pedersen, 27 years old and 8 months pregnant, was gone. Her family thought she was out walking the dog. Her husband said she, Debbie Bergson, but hours passed. The sun fell, and Lochi never came home. Police found her golden retriever wandering the neighborhood, leash still attached, tail wagging as if nothing had happened. Her phone, her purse, her car, all untouched. It looked like she had simply vanished into thin air. At first, her husband, Scott Peterson, seemed devastated. He told reporters how much he loved his wife, how desperate he was to bring her home. His calm voice and handsome smile made him appear like the perfect, grieving husband. But there was something off. Something that didn't fit. He wasn't crying. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't real. He spoke like he was reading a script, smiling at cameras, talking about fishing. While the rest of the country searched for his pregnant wife, Scott Peterson seemed strangely at peace. And then came the first whisper, the rumor that would change everything. A secret. A double life. Another woman. Suddenly, the perfect husband wasn't so perfect anymore. What began as a missing persons case was about to become one of the most shocking murder investigations in American history, because behind that calm smile was a man who didn't want to be a husband, didn't want to be a father. He wanted freedom, and to get it, he would kill for it. It's the morning of December 24th, 2002, Christmas Eve in the quiet Central Valley city of Modesto, California. The neighborhood on Covena Avenue is still and peaceful. Trees shimmered with tinsel. Families are wrapping gifts, preparing dinner, sharing laughs. And at 545 Covena, Lassie Petersen is getting ready for her day. 27 years old, radiant, and 8 months pregnant. She's been counting the days until she finally meets her son Connor. The nursery is ready, the baby clothes are folded, and the house smells faintly of pine and cinnamon. Neighbors see her outside that morning, walking her golden retriever, Mackenzie, with a smile on her face. She waves to a few people decorating for Christmas, then disappears down the sidewalk. It's the last time anyone ever sees her alive. Her husband, Scott Peterson, says he left the house earlier that morning to go fishing at the Barkley Marina, about 90 miles away. He tells police he wanted to get in one last fishing trip before the baby came. An odd decision, but nobody questions it yet. By evening, Lochi still hasn't returned home. The house is quiet, dark, untouched. Her purse is still there. Her car. Her keys. Everything a woman needs to leave still inside. But Mackenzie, the family dog, is back. A neighbor finds him wandering the neighborhood, leash still attached. No sign of Lacey. The sight is haunting. It's like the dog came home, without the person holding the other end. When Scott returns that evening, he calls around to family and friends, acting concerned, but strangely composed. He tells everyone that Lachi went out to walk the dog and never came back. Then, at 5:47 p.m., he calls the police to report her missing. The next few hours turn into chaos. Police arrive. Family members rush to the scene, and soon, volunteers are combing through every inch of the neighborhood, calling her name, searching ditches, checking parks, even the canals. They find nothing. No footprints, no struggle, no trace. The story spreads fast. Within 24 hours, Lassie Petersen's face is on every local newscast, her smile frozen in time beside the word missing. Detectives note how calm Scott seems. He isn't pacing, he isn't breaking down. He's talking to reporters, answering questions like, "It's an inconvenience." When they ask about his day, he says he went fishing alone for sturgeon. A curious choice for a man whose wife vanished hours earlier. Still, the police don't have evidence of a crime. Not yet. They start the search officially, bringing in dogs, helicopters, divers. The entire town of Modesto comes together. Hundreds of volunteers, candles, posters, flyers. It becomes a community crusade. Scott joins the search, but there's something robotic in the way he moves. Cameras catch him handing out flyers, smiling stiffly, thanking volunteers, while others cry. He stays expressionless. When detectives interview him, they ask simple questions. What time did you leave? Where did you launch your boat? Did anyone see you there? His answers are vague, his tone flat. Then, something small, but strange. Investigators discover he didn't tell anyone he was going fishing until after Lacey vanished. Not even his wife's mother. It's as if the alibi appeared after she disappeared. Days turn into weeks. The search grows desperate. Posters. Blanket, California. National news anchors pick up the story. Pregnant woman missing on Christmas Eve. The narrative is perfect for television. Beautiful woman, loving husband, holiday tragedy, and right in the center of it all, Scott Peterson. He looks clean, composed, even charming. He stands in front of microphones, calmly describing how much he loves his wife, an unborn child. But to those who know grief, something feels wrong. When most people lose someone they love, their emotions crack open. But Scott is perfectly in control. Then the rumors start. A woman at a candlelight vigil says she saw Scott whispering on the phone, laughing. Someone else claims he joked with volunteers when cameras were off. Every day, the line between worried husband and cold manipulator grows thinner. The public begins to ask a question police are already thinking. If Scott Peterson didn't kill his wife, then who did? Because one thing is certain. Lochi didn't just disappear. And as the search widens, detectives begin to realize something chilling. The key to finding Lochi might be buried in the lies of her own husband. A pregnant woman vanished on Christmas Eve, and her husband says he was fishing. But every good lie starts with a detail that sounds just believable enough. Before she was a national headline, Lochi Denise Peterson was just a small-town girl with a big heart. She grew up in Modesto, California, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where people leave their doors unlocked and wave to each other from across the street. Lochi was radiant, confident, funny, a natural note. Her friends described her as sunshine in human form. She had that kind of energy that made people feel seen and cared for. And then came Scott Peterson. They met in 1994 at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, both majoring in agricultural business. He was handsome, charming, polite, the kind of guy who knew how to make a first impression. Scott wasn't just confident, he was smooth. And for Lochi, it was love almost instantly. By 1997, they were married. Their wedding photos looked like something out of a magazine, Lochi, in a white lace dress, smiling wide, and Scott standing beside her, clean-cut. The picture of a perfect husband. They opened a small restaurant together, The Shack, a surf-themed cafe that reflected their easygoing California style. They worked side by side, building their future one dream at a time. Lochi talked about starting a family, buying a home, planting a garden. Scott talked about success, travel, and freedom. Two visions that, at first, seemed to align perfectly. To everyone watching, they were the couple everyone wanted to be. Good-looking, young, ambitious. But perfection, especially when performed, often hides the cracks beneath. When they moved back to Modesto, they settled into a beautiful one-story home on Covina Avenue. Neighbors remember them walking their golden retriever, Mackenzie, in the evenings. Lochi would wave and chat, glowing with excitement as she showed off her growing baby bump. Scott, meanwhile, kept his distance, polite but detached. Friends noticed small things. How he avoided talking about the pregnancy. How he seemed disinterested when Lacey spoke about baby names or plans for the nursery. He'd change the subject, smile half-heartedly, and check his phone. But no one suspected anything dark. After all, couples drift a little, and Scott always knew how to charm his way out of awkward questions. Lochi's friends adored her. She was the planner, the caretaker, the one who remembered birthdays and threw baby showers. She loved cooking for family, decorating for holidays, and doting on her husband. She was all in. Emotionally, mentally, completely devoted to her life with Scott. But the man she loved wasn't who she thought he was. Behind closed doors, Scott was growing restless. He didn't like responsibility. He didn't like commitment. He wanted the image of the perfect life, not the reality of it. By the summer of 2002, as Lachi's belly grew and her joy radiated, Scott was quietly pulling away. Friends said he became colder, distant, distracted. Lache brushed it off as work stress. But, in truth, he was already living a double life. He started disappearing for long stretches, business trips, golf with clients, fishing alone. Excuses that sounded harmless, believable. But the emotional distance was widening. Lachi confided to her mother that she felt something was off. That Scott wasn't as excited about the baby as she'd hoped. She said he was distant, but insisted he loved her. She wanted to believe it. That's what makes this story so haunting, because when you look at their home videos, their photos, their smiles, everything looks perfect. The Christmas lights on the porch, the nursery painted soft yellow, the husband with his arm around his glowing wife. But if you look closely, the smile on Scott's face never reaches his eyes. He was already imagining a different life. One where he wasn't tied down by fatherhood or responsibility. A life where he could start over, and soon he'd find a way to make that fantasy real. As police searched for Loche, they re-piecing together the image of this perfect couple, the devoted wife and the loving husband. But it won't take long before that picture begins to rot from the inside, because somewhere in that small, perfect home on Covina Avenue, love turned into resentment, and resentment into murder. To the world, they were perfect. But perfect was just another word for pretending. Christmas Eve, a day meant for family, laughter, and warmth, begins with quiet dread in Modesto. Lassie Peterson, 8 months pregnant, was supposed to be wrapping gifts, preparing breakfast, and getting ready for Christmas dinner with her mom. Instead, she's missing. By 5:15 p.m., her stepfather calls 911. My daughter's missing. She's 8 months pregnant. Within hours, what started as a local concern turns into a community-wide search. Neighbors, friends, even strangers gather at the Peterson home. Flashlights sweep through the orchards, parks, and nearby rivers. Volunteers print missing posters. News vans line the street. The story spreads like wildfire. A young, pregnant woman vanishes on Christmas Eve. It's every family's nightmare, and the country's next obsession. Inside that whirlwind, Scott Peterson stands calmly on his porch. While others shout her name into the dark, Scott folds his arms, expression unreadable. He tells police Loche went to walk the dog around 10 a.m., while he drove to Berkeley to go fishing at the marina. When I got home, the dog was back. Li Sheng, Loche's gone. Detectives take notes, but something feels off. His tone is flat, rehearsed. He doesn't ask, "Is she okay?" He doesn't cry. He just explains, mechanically, what he did that day. The next morning, Lache's face is everywhere. TV anchors flash her photo across America. A bright smile, brown hair, and a belly full of promise. Headlines scream, "Pregnant woman missing on Christmas Eve." Scott appears in interviews, pleading for her safe return. But too many, he doesn't look like a desperate husband. He looks distant, controlled. Meanwhile, the search effort explodes. Helicopters hover over Modesto. Divers comb nearby canals. Volunteers form human chains through the parks. "We just want to bring Loche home," one woman tells a local reporter, clutching a photo against her chest. Scott joins the search briefly. He hands out flyers, answers questions, gives the occasional press statement. But even the volunteers begin whispering among themselves. He seems too calm, too polite, almost too normal. While the community prays, detectives start digging. They confirm his fishing trip. Yes, he launched his boat at Berkeley Marina, but something doesn't fit. Why drive 90 miles away on Christmas Eve morning when your pregnant wife is home alone? Do any day? When they ask what he was fishing for, Scott hesitates. Sturgeon, maybe striped bass. He can't recall the bait he used. He doesn't remember the exact time he left or came back. To police, that's not forgetfulness. It's performance. As the days pass, Modesto turns into a media circus. News anchors camp outside the Peterson home. Reporters chase every rumor. Every new lead sends waves of hope and heartbreak. Even celebrities like Oprah and America's Most Wanted mention the case. Lochi's mother, Sharon Roca, speaks publicly, her voice trembling. "Please, if anyone knows anything, help us find my daughter." The clip runs nationwide. It humanizes the case. It makes everyone watching feel connected, a mother begging the world to bring her baby home. Meanwhile, Scott plays his part, the worried husband. He organizes press conferences, goes on TV with his perfectly combed hair and quiet voice. But behind the scenes, police notice something chilling. He's avoiding Loche's family. He's not calling in for updates. He's also refusing a polygraph test. Still, the nation watches with hope. Maybe she was kidnapped. Maybe she's hiding. Maybe, just maybe, she'll be found alive. Weeks pass. Posters fade in the sun. The story slips from the headlines until one piece of news brings it back. A mystery woman has come forward. A woman named Amber Frey walks into the Modesto Police Department. Her hands shake as she holds a photograph. She points to the man in it, smiling, charming, familiar. "That's Scott Peterson," she says quietly. "He told me his wife was dead." In that moment, the search for Loche shifts from rescue to exposure. The perfect husband becomes the prime suspect. The missing wife's story turns into something darker, something deliberate. As the world rallies behind Loche, detectives begin piecing together a puzzle that doesn't lead to a stranger or a break-in, but to the man who shared her bed. While the world searched for Loche, Scott was already living as if she didn't exist. The nation wants answers, and the next twist will leave them speechless. By January 2003, the search for Loche Peterson had consumed the nation. Every TV station led with her story. The glowing mother-to-be who vanished without a trace. Police had combed lakes, canals, and open fields. Thousands of volunteers searched day and night, but behind the scenes, investigators had quietly shifted focus, not towards strangers, but towards Scott Peterson himself. He wasn't acting like a man desperate to find his wife. He wasn't calling police daily for updates. He wasn't clinging to hope. He was detached, even distant. Then, out of nowhere, came the phone call that would blow the entire case apart. "My name is Amber Frey," the woman said to detectives, "and I think I might be dating the man you're looking for." The room fell silent. Amber, a 27-year-old massage therapist from Fresno, had seen the news coverage, Loche's smiling face, the husband's calm appeals for help, and something inside her froze demand on television. Was her boyfriend. She told investigators everything. They'd met in November, a month before Loche vanished. Scott was charming, attentive, romantic, the kind of man who said all the right things. He told her he was single. Then, just weeks before Christmas, he said something strange. "This will be my first Christmas without my wife. She died." Amber believed him. She had no reason not to. He spoke with such quiet sadness that it sounded real. But when she saw his face plastered across national headlines, "Missing Loche Peterson, 8 months pregnant," her stomach dropped. Scott's wife wasn't dead. She was missing. That realization changed everything. Amber went straight to police and agreed to help. She wasn't just going to tell her story. She would record him. Over the next few weeks, as the world searched for Loche, Scott was on the phone with Amber, lying, manipulating, pretending to be thousands of miles away. "I'm in Paris right now," he told her, as the sound of candlelight vigils played in the background. "There's fireworks here. The Eiffel Tower looks amazing." But he wasn't in Paris. He was at Loche's vigil, surrounded by mourners praying for the wife he'd killed. Those calls became the foundation of the case. Investigators listened as Scott spun story after story, fake business trips, fake meetings, fake grief. He spoke of a future with Amber while pretending to search for his pregnant wife. And the public, they turned on him instantly. When Amber came forward publicly in early January, it was front-page news. Scott Peterson, his secret mistress, revealed. The other woman who exposed a killer. Loche's family was devastated. Sharon Roca, Loche's mother, later said, That was the moment I knew he killed her. No doubt left. The case that once inspired sympathy now sparked outrage. The man once seen as a heartbroken husband was suddenly exposed as a liar, a cheater, and possibly a murderer. TV pundits dissected every detail. Why would he lie about being a widower? Why continue the affair while his wife was missing? How could he speak of Paris while pretending to mourn? But the most chilling part wasn't. Tell you what side it was, how is Ali? He said it. Calm. Smooth. Charming. Scott Peterson didn't just deceive Amber, he deceived an entire country. Behind the smile and soft-spoken demeanor was a man spinning two realities. One for the cameras, one for himself. One about a missing wife, another about a new life without her. The contrast was devastating. As volunteers hung up new missing posters, Scott was sending love notes to his mistress, as Lochi's mother begged for her daughter's safe return. Scott was whispering to Amber about their future together. When police finally played the recordings to the press, the illusion shattered completely. Scott Peterson, the clean-cut, grieving husband, was now a national villain. Amber's courage transformed the investigation. She became the voice that exposed his double life. Her cooperation gave police what they needed most. Motive? Scott didn't just want attention. He wanted freedom. He wanted a world without Loche, without a child, without the responsibilities of family life. And for the first time, investigators saw it clearly. This wasn't a random disappearance. This was a plan. He didn't want to lose his image, one detective said. He wanted to lose his wife. Amber's recordings gave them leverage, but they still didn't have proof of murder. No body. No physical evidence. No crime scene. Yet something inside every investigator told them the same thing. Loche wasn't coming home. And when the truth finally surfaced months later, when the San Francisco Bay gave up, what it was hiding, the world would see just how calculated Scott Peterson's lies really were. The mistress wasn't the twist. She was the key to everything. By February 2003, the media circus around Scott Peterson had reached a fever pitch. Every news channel had a camera parked outside his Modesto home. Reporters swarmed the driveway. Neighbors whispered behind curtains, and through it all, Scott stayed calm. Too calm. He gave interviews, smiled politely, and even joked with journalists. To some, it looked like composure. To investigators, it reeked of arrogance. Detectives had already torn apart his fishing trip story, piece by piece. On Christmas Eve morning, the day Loche vanished, Scott claimed he drove from Modesto to the Berkeley Marina to go fishing. He said he left around 9:30 a.m., stayed a few hours, then returned home to find Loche gone. Simple story, but every detail started to fall apart. The marina logs showed no one had seen him launch. Phone records placed him in inconsistent locations. And the biggest red flag, his trip route. He'd driven hours just to test a small boat. On Christmas Eve, while his pregnant wife was home alone. Detectives began retracing his steps. When they searched his warehouse, they found the boat newly purchased, barely used, and something odd beside it. Bags of concrete. All but one had been poured. When asked about it, Scott's side Ed made anchors for his boat, but only one anchor was found. Where were the rest? Investigators started to suspect what everyone feared. Those missing concrete anchors were used to weigh down Loche's body. The San Francisco Bay, the same spot Scott claimed to be fishing, became the focus of the search. Divers scoured the murky waters for weeks, battling tides, wind, and freezing rain. Nothing surfaced. Still, detectives refused to back down. They collected every shred of circumstantial evidence they could. Loche's hair was discovered embedded in Scott's boat pliers. Fibers from her clothing matched debris found near his fishing area. The pattern was too perfect to be coincidence. Meanwhile, Scott's behavior grew stranger. He traded in Loche's SUV. He put their house up for sale. He even reached out to Amber Frey again. Still trying to maintain control over her. He told her, "They're watching me. The media won't leave me alone." But he never once asked if police had found his wife. By March, the public's sympathy had evaporated. Talk shows, tabloids, and radio hosts called him the husband from hell. But no one could prove murder without a body. That changed in April 2003. A couple walking along the San Francisco Bay shoreline spotted something tangled in seaweed, a small, unrecognizable form. It was the body of a newborn boy, not far from there. Another discovery: a torso, missing limbs, and a head. Lassie Peterson. The scene was haunting. The baby had been expelled from her body during decomposition. Both had been in the water for months. DNA confirmed what investigators already knew. Deep down, Scott Peterson's fishing spot was now a crime scene. The timing was chilling. Within days of the discovery, Scott fled Modesto. When police tracked him down to a golf course in San Diego, they could hardly recognize him. His hair was bleached blonde. His car was packed with thousands in cash, camping gear, a fake ID, and survival supplies. He told police he was going golfing. No one believed that. He was arrested on April 18th, 2003. The same day the bodies were officially identified. When the news broke, the nation erupted. TV screens filled with headlines. Scott Peterson arrested for murder of wife and unborn son. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of people held signs. Justice for Lachey. Monster husband. Investigators finally laid out the case they'd built for months. A timeline of deception. A motive rooted in freedom, and a husband who killed to escape the life he'd built. They believed Scott had murdered Lachey at home, transported her body in his truck, and dumped her in the bay during that so-called fishing trip. The anchors now missing had likely been used to keep her submerged. Even without direct eyewitnesses, the evidence formed a powerful story. His lies, his affair, his alibi. That unraveled, and his calm demeanor, so controlled it was almost unnatural. Detectives described him as eerily emotionless. Even when confronted with photos of Lachey's remains, Scott stared blankly, showing no grief, no shock. It was Asif already made peace with what he'd done. The case had shifted from a mystery to a tragedy with undeniable clarity. The only thing left was to prove it in court. "We knew he did it," one detective later said, "but what chilled us wasn't the act itself. It was how ordinary he made it seem." As the camera pans across the bay, calm/blue and silent, the narrator's voice drops low. He thought the ocean would keep his secret forever, but even the tide has a conscience. By the time the trial began in June 2004, the name Scott Peterson had become a cultural obsession. Talk shows dissected his smirk. News anchors analyzed his body language. Every photo of him, every glance, every half-smile was picked apart like a clue. It wasn't just a trial. It was a public reckoning. Inside the Redwood City courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Dozens of reporters camped outside for weeks, and crowds lined up before sunrise, hoping to glimpse the man accused of murdering his pregnant wife. Scott entered wearing a crisp suit, clean-shaven.com. He looked less like a killer and more like a salesman at a conference. Polite, composed, rehearsed. Even in shackles, he radiated control. Prosecutor Rick DiStasso began his opening statement with a chilling line. Scott Peterson didn't want to be a husband. He didn't want to be a father. He wanted freedom, and he killed for it. The jury sat frozen. For months, they'd be taken on a journey through Scott's lies, secret recordings, and a web of manipulation. Amber Frey, the other woman, became the heart of the prosecution's story. When she took the stand, the courtroom went silent. Her voice trembled at first, but she never broke. She described their first meeting, the dinners, the charm. Then she revealed the bombshell moment when Scott told her his wife was gone 2 weeks before Lachey's disappearance. Amber's phone recordings with Scott played for the jury. In one call, he told her he was in Paris on New Year's Eve. In reality, he was standing at a vigil for his missing wife, candles flickering around a photo of Lachey, pretending to mourn. The tape played softly in the courtroom. Scott's smooth voice filled the air. "I'm just walking around the Eiffel Tower. It's beautiful tonight." Meanwhile, TV footage showed him in California, surrounded by grieving neighbors. The contrast was sickening. Amber's tears flowed silently as she listened. Members of the jury looked visibly disturbed. The prosecution methodically built their case. The cement anchors, the hair in the pliers, the cell tower data matching his path to the bay, the bleach found in his warehouse, and his vanishing act after the bodies were discovered, the dyed hair, cash, and fake ID. They argued this wasn't panic, it was preparation. He wasn't running from grief. He was running from justice. Every piece of evidence formed a haunting picture. Scott Peterson had planned the perfect disappearance. He wanted to erase Lachie quietly and step into a new life with Amber. Free from responsibility, free from fatherhood, free from the image of the perfect husband. But as powerful as the evidence was, the defense clung to one line of hope. There was no direct evidence, no witnesses, no murder weapon, no blood in the house. Defense attorney Mark Dragos painted Scott as a victim of media hysteria. He claimed investigators had built a narrative before finding proof that maybe, just maybe, Lachie had been kidnapped by someone else. But that argument crumbled when jurors heard Scott's recorded calls from jail. His tone was casual, cold. He joked with family. He flirted with women. He never once mentioned Lachie's name. Prosecutors seized on that, showing the contrast between a grieving husband and a man who seemed relieved she was gone. Then came one of the most chilling moments of the entire trial. A detective described how Lachie's remains were discovered near the same location Scott had been fishing. He pointed to a map. The red circle marking Scott's boat route lined up almost perfectly with where her body surfaced. You could feel the air leave the courtroom. One juror later said, "That's when I knew he killed her there." The defense fought back hard, claiming tidal movement could have carried the body anywhere. But the timing, the pattern, and the lies had already spoken louder than science. On November 12, 2004, after 5 months of testimony and over 160 witnesses, the jury finally returned. Reporters crammed into the courtroom. Cameras rolled outside. The clerk read the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree." Scott stared ahead, motionless. No tears, no words. He simply blinked, once, as if acknowledging what he already knew. As the second verdict was read for baby Connor murder in the second degree, the galley erupted. Lachie's family sobbed. Her mother whispered, "Finally." Outside, the crowd cheered. Banners waved. People hugged strangers. After nearly 2 years of speculation, heartbreak, and deceit, justice had spoken. But the most haunting moment came when a reporter shouted, "Scott, do you have anything to say?" He looked straight at the cameras, expressionless, and said nothing. That silence said everything. The man who once promised a lifetime of love had murdered his pregnant wife on Christmas Eve. Not in a burst of rage, but in a calculated act of selfishness. He didn't just kill Lachie. He killed the future they built, and the son they would never meet. The media called him the most hated man in America. But in the courtroom, he was simply what the jury saw him as. A husband who traded love for freedom. As the camera fades to the courthouse steps, the narrator's voice echoes. Scott Peterson wanted a new beginning, but instead, he became a symbol of betrayal. In the end, the truth wasn't uncovered by science. It was revealed by his own lies. The verdict was in. Scott Peterson, once the charming husband, the soon-to-be father, the man who said he just wanted his wife home, was now officially a convicted murderer. The news swept across the nation like a storm. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of people erupted in cheers. Some cried, some prayed, and some simply stood in stunned silence. After nearly 2 years of speculation, deception, and heartbreak, justice had finally been served. But inside, there was no celebration, only exhaustion. Lachie's mother, Sharon Roca, held a photo of her daughter close to her chest. Reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs exploded, but she didn't say a word. Her tears said everything. "We waited for the truth," she would later say. "Now we just have to live with it." In March 2005, the sentence came down. Death. Scott sat still as the judge read it, his face pale, jaw clenched, eyes distant. No tears, no apology, It was as if he had already detached himself from the reality he created, as if he were watching someone else's life collapse. The courtroom gasped. Some cheered, others simply exhaled, knowing this was the final chapter, or so they thought. He was taken to San Quentin State Prison, California's most infamous death row. A concrete cell overlooking the same bay where his wife and unborn son were found. Irony so cold it almost felt deliberate. Every day, he'd see the fog roll over the water, the same tides that carried Lache's remains back to shore, the same waves that revealed his lies. Reporters described him as eerily calm. He lifted weights, read books, even smiled during interviews. He insisted he was innocent, repeating it like a script. I did not kill my wife or my son, but the world had already made up its mind. The Pedersen case didn't just end in a courtroom. It became a reflection of something deeper. It forced America to question how well we truly know the people closest to us. Because on the surface, Scott and Lache were perfect. A beautiful young couple, a new home, a baby on the way, Christmas around the corner. The image every family dreams of. But behind the smiles, Scott was already living another life, one built on lies, affairs, and fantasies of freedom. The tragedy wasn't just the murder. It was the illusion, the mask of normalcy that fooled everyone until it was too late. Years passed, and appeals followed. In 2020, California Supreme Court overturned Scott's death sentence due to jury selection errors. But the conviction itself still stood. He remains in prison, serving life without parole. Even now, more than 2 decades later, people still argue whether justice was fully served. Some say the evidence was circumstantial. Others believe he got exactly what he deserved. But one fact remains unshakable. Lache and baby Connor never came home. Her family built a foundation in her name, dedicated to missing persons and victims of domestic violence. They turned grief into action, pain into purpose. Because for them, remembering Lache wasn't about reliving tragedy. It was about saving someone else before it happens again. In interviews, Sharon Roca said something that lingers in every viewer's mind. He didn't just take my daughter. He took Christmas. He took joy. He took the future we were supposed to have. Every December, when the lights go up and families gather, she lights a single candle for Lache and Connor. A quiet reminder that love should never end in betrayal. The story of Scott Peterson isn't just about murder. It's about deception. It's about how a man can look into cameras and smile while the world searches for the woman he killed. It's about the perfect mask and what happens when it finally cracks. Because in the end, Scott didn't just lose his freedom. He lost the life he pretended to want. He'll never hold the child he erased. Never see another sunrise outside concrete walls. Never escape the shadow of what he did. He thought he could create a new beginning. But all he created was an ending that would haunt the world. She carried his future, and he chose to destroy it. She trusted him with her life, and it cost her everything. Subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the lies behind love.